Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced on Tuesday that Britain were prepared to recognize a Palestinian state in September at the United Nations General Assembly, citing growing public anger over images of starving children in Gaza. This announcement came a day after talks in Scotland with U.S. President Donald Trump, who indicated he would not mind if Britain recognized a Palestinian state, despite Washington's long-standing refusal to do so as Israel's closest ally. If Britain proceeds, it would become the second Western power on the UN Security Council to take this step, following France's recognition last week. This development reflects Israel's deepening isolation over its conduct in the war against Hamas in Gaza, where a humanitarian disaster has unfolded and the Palestinian death toll has risen above 60,000. Starmer outlined conditions for Britain's recognition, stating the country would make this move unless Israel took substantive steps to allow more aid into Gaza, made clear there would be no annexation of the West Bank, and committed to a long-term peace process delivering a two-state solution where a Palestinian state would coexist peacefully alongside Israel. Speaking to reporters, Starmer emphasized the Palestinian people's terrible suffering, describing the catastrophic failure of aid in Gaza that has resulted in starving babies and children too weak to stand, creating images that would stay with observers for a lifetime. Before making his announcement, Starmer held a phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, according to an unnamed source. Israel's foreign ministry responded by posting on X that Britain's move constituted a reward for Hamas and would harm efforts to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. The sight of emaciated Gaza children has shocked the world in recent days, with a hunger monitor warning earlier on Tuesday that a worst-case famine scenario was unfolding in Gaza, requiring immediate action to avoid widespread death. Israel has denied pursuing a policy of starvation, with Foreign Minister Gideon Saar acknowledging the situation in Gaza was tough, but claiming there were lies circulating about starvation. Despite international criticism intensifying, Israel announced steps over the weekend to ease aid access, though the UN World Food Programme reported it was not receiving the necessary permissions to deliver sufficient aid. This decision marks a striking reversal in policy after Starmer disappointed many in his party last week by rejecting calls to recognize a Palestinian state, saying the timing must be right as part of a wider peace process. In recent days, Starmer has become increasingly vocal about the Gaza crisis, describing it as an absolute catastrophe and noting that the British public were revolted by scenes of mass hunger and desperation. Starmer indicated his government would assess in September how far the parties have met these steps before making a final decision, emphasizing that no one would have a veto over this decision. He spoke after recalling his cabinet during summer holidays on Tuesday to discuss a new proposed peace plan being developed with other European leaders and methods to deliver more humanitarian aid to Gaza's 2.2 million people. Successive British governments have stated they would formally recognize a Palestinian state when the time was right, without ever establishing a timetable or specifying necessary conditions. Some lawmakers in Britain's governing Labour Party suggested Starmer had been reluctant to formally recognize a Palestinian state because it would mean distancing itself from the United States position. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio called France's announcement last week recognizing a Palestinian state a reckless decision. China and Russia remain the only other permanent UN Security Council members to recognize a Palestinian state. The recognition issue gained prominence after President Emmanuel Macron announced on Thursday that France would recognize Palestine as a state in territories Israel captured during the 1967 Middle East War. Israel and the United States condemned France's move, calling it a reward for Palestinian Hamas militants who control Gaza and whose October 7, 2023 attack on Israel triggered the current war. At the start of the Gaza war in October 2023, when Starmer was opposition leader, he fully supported Israel's right to defend itself. However, his stance has shifted toward a tougher approach to Israel, particularly since his election as prime minister just over a year ago. His government dropped the previous administration's challenge over International Criminal Court arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and suspended some weapons sales to Israel. Last month, Britain sanctioned two far-right Israeli cabinet ministers, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, accusing them of repeatedly inciting violence against Palestinians.